Hello, and welcome back to the Raw Code Academy. I'm your host, David Flanagan, and today I'm excited to be doing Raw Code Live as we take a look at Gimlet, a developer platform built around GitOps principles. To teach us more about Gimlet, we are joined by its creator and maintainer, Laszlo Fugas. Hey man, how are you?
Hey, David. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the intro.
Absolutely my pleasure to have you on today's session. I'm really excited for this one. I'm looking forward to just, you and I, we always have good conversations. So this is going to be a good episode today.
Yeah, we don't necessarily see eye to eye on every topic, but I think that's the good part of it. So I'm really excited to be here. And hello everyone. And
Yeah, I always see that as a great thing, though, right? Because we get to share our own opinions. And as long as we're all wise enough to share them in a way where we can have an open mind and learn together, it doesn't matter if you win or change someone's opinion, but we broaden our experience as a whole. So, yeah, excited is definitely where I am today. For anyone who's not aware of you, can you just tell us a little bit more about you and what you've been up to?
Sure. So I'm Laszlo Fogas. I'm sitting in Hungary, where it's very warm right now, like 35 Celsius. Hey, Alessandro. And so it's end of the week. We've been busy. We have relaunched Gimlet's onboarding flow just a couple of weeks ago and did a lot of marketing efforts recently. So that's what we are up to. We are a bootstrap company, so it's just the three of us. So it's not like a huge venture-backed operation with plethora of developers and DevRel people and so on. We are bootstrapping, meaning we are building the product. I am sort of the marketing / product guy and trying to figure out the direction and so on. There is a React developer and also Golang, so like full stack. He's building features. And then there is someone who is working with clients. So we do consulting, Gimlet related and bespoke consultancy as well. So like cloud things from Terraform to Kubernetes and doing all kinds of stuff just to keep the lights on. And they have been on for more than 4 years now. So it's a bit slow doing like this, but we are default to live, so it's pretty enjoyable, to be honest, to be in this position.
Awesome.
And
that sounds amazing.
Yeah. and we have Gimlet as our main product. It was formed around the GitOps principles. I started early on with Flux 1.0 or even before that. And Flux was amazing. And GitOps didn't click for me at first. But when I've seen it in action I think in the Nordics community, in the cloud native Nordics, there were many early adopters. And I kept fighting them, like, why is this a good idea? But then I definitely joined the bandwagon. And it was very obvious from the get-go that the GitOps is not a full solution. So it's a nice idea, but to make it useful for your company, you have to build the workflows and you have to wire things up the way as your team works. And since I am doing consulting, and I was doing consulting back then as a single person, like a solo shop, it was very obvious that I need to build these components myself as well. And I have a handful of customers using Gimlet in the Nordics region, in Copenhagen and nearby. And 10, 20, 30 developers each. And there's some open source adoption as well.
All right, awesome. Well, maybe we can dive into what's different with Gimlet, right? You've said that you weren't on board with the idea of GitOps initially. You kind of slowly came towards the idea, and Gimlet does want to have a differentiator, be a little bit different. Can you go into that in more detail and tell people what we're going to be looking at today?
Absolutely. Maybe if you bring up my screen so others can see as well, because we just relaunched the website, which looks a little bit rough at the moment, but essentially we thrown out a bunch of stuff. I'm just not sure if my screen is up yet.
Yeah, if you just want to show what you want to show, and then now there we go.
Yes. Yeah, of course. So we actually this looked much more corporate before, and all kinds of buttons and options and stuff. But we went really to just to the core idea, yes, you should fire up a cluster on your laptop, and yes, you should start Gimlet, and yes, you should start deploying from the get-go. And what's different, I think, in the Kubernetes ecosystem, there are many tools which are sort of centered around the idea of an inventory of pods and config maps and deployments and ingresses, and you see them in tables without much context. So your application workflows kind of lost in the picture. You just see this list of resources you have, and then of course there are custom resources and all that complexity that comes with it. And with Gimlet, I think you're going to see later in the demo is that everything is centered around like your commits and branches you have. This is very similar to GitHub, so the look and feel is kind of what you get with GitHub's commit view. And of course, you have a real-time Kubernetes view as well, to the very minimal thing. So it's not like a full map of all the resources you have. You have deployments and pods, and that's it basically. And there's a URL where you can click it. And so it was very early on. I think this was in focus that the UI has to be centered around the developer and their use cases, just a single repository they are working with. And basically they want to see their CI statuses, like, is my build done? Is an automatic deploy is done? If I want to deploy manually to some environment, that was the key use cases. And of course, rollback and so on. And the other thing is that with GitOps is that it's great, GitOps, I mean the Flux CDs and the Argo CD approach. So not necessarily doing Terraform triggered from a CI pipeline and so on, but more like, the CD, like continuous delivery of Kubernetes YAML. That's that kind of definition. And with GitOps, it was very clear early on that there are a lot of details like file structures and folder structures, what file goes where is my base customized layer, how does that come together in a staging environment, and so on. And the whole thing is basically just a big exercise of copying files here and there, templating something, and writing to Git repositories. And some very basic things actually got broken on the way. So for example, once you have written into the Git repository, it's often things are not connected back together. Like, is my application really deployed? Is the health check passing? And all those things you have to configure yourself in Fluxity and Argo as well. And like, still today, I think there were some GitOps skeptic articles many years ago, like 3 years ago as well. And some of those criticisms still stands. Like if you go into like the GitOps room on the Kubernetes Slack or the CNCF Slack, like very often you face the question, like, how do I do promotions? And then somebody comes in, tells like, how is my folder structure looks, and how do I move files in between, and so on. And it's all very basic. Basically, we are missing one abstraction level, and how to do a smoke test, and what happens after the deployment. All these things you have to basically glue together in GitHub Actions or some CI solution you have. And honestly, we should do better. And this is definitely a problem space where Gimlet wants to shine. And yeah, so these are the two core differences where what I wanted to highlight, and that's where we have very strong opinions, like how things should be done. Plus, we are very much into Kubernetes. Like, we want to make Kubernetes boring. That is sort of one of the North Star of the platform engineering scene and the ecosystem and so on. But what I'm bored of really is Kubernetes memes. Like, it's so complex. It's too steep of a learning curve, which I actually don't think it's true today. Of course, you can always go into complexity, and people have been bad at stopping just at the good enough with Kubernetes. They have to do multi-cluster failover over service mesh use cases, but not many people need those. So actually with Gimlet, we just want to focus on people who get introduced to Kubernetes and they just want to deploy something. And they don't care too much about, container networking and so on. So that's Gimlet in a nutshell. I'm pretty sure I triggered a few people. Did I trigger you?
Uh, I don't feel triggered. No, I think I actually agree with a lot of what you were saying. So two key points for me, right, is you spoke about the status quo right now with GitOps, right? Flux CD and Argo CD. Those are the two most adopted. I'm going to say platform, but I don't mean that they are platforms, right? But those are the two most common tools used for GitOps. But they're building blocks, they're primitives. Like you said, if you want to do blue-green deploys, if you want to do automatic remediation, if you want to do gated deploys, none of this exists in either of those tools. You have to then go use Argo workflows, you have to go get Flagger, you have to look at the Captain project, you have to keep layering on more and more tools, right? And this is the common frustration with everyone I speak to about Kubernetes. It's like, I just want to run some containers. I just want to
Yes.
deploy my application. And then that leads right into your second point, which I also agreed with. You know, in the Kubernetes community, especially, and I'll make myself guilty of this, right? We start talking about eBPF and network policies and fancy deployments, multi-clusters, hybrid architectures. Yeah, of course, some of this stuff is very, very logical for some subset of customers that are trying to have certain resiliency patterns. But the majority of people just want some containers orchestrated on 1, 2, 3 nodes, like not even large clusters. They don't need to know about Falco and all these things. Now, of course, security is important, but everyone has a different risk appetite, and we don't really appreciate or acknowledge that enough. And I'd say the vast majority of people just want to get containers into production and keep their customers happy. That is it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, not triggered at all.
Actually, you said a word like Argo workflows. Like I go to many meetups, and it's very often I hear that what kind of big machinery they built with Argo workflows, and there were some examples which were basically just re-implementing a continuous integration server, which felt like, oh my god, sure, you have these tools, but you don't have to do everything yourself. So those definitely not the kind of Kubernetes things that I like. So I definitely want to focus on making it more accessible. Like just a month ago, or a little bit, actually, it was 2 months ago, I was asking on Twitter, like, the Gartner hype cycle.
Mhm.
And I just wanted people to place Kubernetes on it. And there were a couple of answers that, hey, Kubernetes is fine. I use it. For me, it's in the plateau of productivity. And for more like tool makers and people who are aware of the grand scheme of things, it's more like in like on the beginning of going up that plateau. Yeah, because we are missing a couple of building blocks here. We are doing a lot of complexity things, but eventually, like if we reach this plateau, like I believe I have reached it for myself and many people who are building these platforms. And honestly, I much rather copy a kubectl command off of the internet today than any sudo do something on my VM kind of approach. So for me, Kubernetes is the go-to place, a go-to platform. And I would really hope that we would have like maybe resources like the DigitalOcean blog or this knowledge base like they built over the years. And because what you did, like, or maybe do today, if you have a VPS or like a VM, is that you type, how do I install Postgres and how do I set, I don't know, like a max page size for the kernel. I have no idea about the page size parameter in etc for the kernel, but I just copy from the DigitalOcean blog and I trust them. And I think we might miss some of these in Kubernetes, or I actually don't know or don't fully understand like why people see Kubernetes as complex still. Like, yeah, I could go on and on about this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add just a little bit of flavor to that, but I don't want to spend too much time talking
Okay.
about that is specifically, right? We've got a really cool product to look at. But you're
Okay.
right again. I work with a lot of companies adopting Kubernetes. Yeah, beer break. That's a good idea. Cheers.
Yeah, we agreed to have a beer because it's a long week and a very warm one in Hungary. So
Exactly. So yeah, I work with a lot of people adopting Kubernetes, and they're not coming to me with difficult problems or difficult challenges. It's not like, oh, we want to apply SecComp profiles and improve our security posture. Like that never happens. It's we changed the config map and our deployment didn't update. Like, what do we need to do? And it's like, yeah, there's loads of these little rough edges in Kubernetes that we need more knowledge bases and how-to guides and just a place people can just look up and say, how do I fix this, right? Even
Yeah.
if you say adopt immutable config maps, like even the operation of applying them to a cluster is much more difficult and not where it needs to be today. So yeah, there are loads of things like that. And again, everything you're saying is right. I'm not triggered. So.
Cool. I'm happy to hear that. All right. Should we jump into the demo then?
Yeah, let's take a look at Gimlet.
All right. So I will just roughly follow the documentation and encourage everyone to really try it, because all you need is just a Kubernetes cluster. That's again, could be a tall order for many, but we recommend K3D because it just works locally. So this is how I'm going to kick things off. I'm going to straight into the documentation, going to do installation, launching K3D, which is optional. Of course, you can use Civo and other providers. And there is this comment, how you launch a cluster. Usually this is how you launch a cluster. In our K3D guide, we tell why to launch the cluster like this, basically.
Could you zoom in 3 times, please?
Could you say it again, please?
Could you zoom in 3 times?
3 times, yes.
Perfect, that's the one.
All right. So this is how you normally launch a cluster with K3D, and we basically tell people to disable the built-in ingress controller component because we want to GitOps everything. So that's just why it's longer than it could be. The terminal. Simple. And again, just to reiterate on the previous point made, is that if launching a cluster is this complex, that's not bad. I mean, I've seen a lot worse.
Definitely. Yeah, I like K3D. It's a very handy tool.
Exactly, and the whole ecosystem, which I believe is super mature. So if you use commands like get and describe and so on, you can get very far. So we have a cluster, and how you install Gimlet. One of the easiest ways is just kubectl apply a YAML of GitHub.
What are the alternative options to install? Is there Helm charts? Is there operators?
Yes.
Like what's the preferred way?
There is a Helm chart, which is hosted on GitHub. And it's actually, the values are hosted here. Basically, it's using a Helm chart called OneChart. This is our general purpose web application chart, which takes a few values like an image, a tag, port, and a few variables like host, like it's running on localhost.
Okay, cool.
We don't do operators or anything like that. That has been always a little bit far from the vision. All right, so at this point, it's running in the cluster. You can copy a port forward command, access that rather quickly. And here we are, just a initial page. And the admin key is in the logs. Currently, it could be put into a secret, which is on the list.
I guess that's just generated randomly on deploy.
Exactly. This is just, and it's only printed until you log in first, and then you set things up. Oh, I forgot to.
Yeah, port forward.
Oh no, my demo is broken. First click, it's broken.
Woohoo!
What you see here, very basic. You're gonna see your repositories here once you integrated GitHub, and you have environments, and there's a built-in one It's called Profound Sky. It's a random one, the nice random name generator.
Can I
Yeah,
ask a
so
question?
basically, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so as you saw, I was logged into the UI for the first time, provided the admin key. The first two tabs used to be our repositories, which makes sense, right? It's GitOps. We have to add some sort of repository to apply to the cluster. But we also see environments, which means initially I'm thinking, okay, Gimlet supports multiple clusters out of the box. So is the idea for Gimlet that you have like a control plane cluster that doesn't run workloads that runs Gimlet, and then you attach your workload clusters, or would you run that in the cluster with the workloads all at the same time?
Again, just due to simplicity, we tell people to run Gimlet in one of their clusters, whether that's staging or production or pre-prod. I run it in the production cluster for our Gimlet deployment. So there is no control plane cluster simply because of cost considerations. But of course, you could keep Gimlet on the control plane cluster.
Okay, cool.
And these environments naturally would be called staging, production, and pre-prod. This is just this communicates that this is just for it's like a sandbox.
Got it.
All right, let's do. Which one should we do first? Environments or repositories? GitHub or cluster?
Let's do cluster.
Let's do cluster. So,
can you zoom in a little bit on this page, please?
Of course, yes.
All right, good.
Yeah, so again, just the K3D command if you would need a cluster again, if you, for example, so Gimlet has a SaaS version. So there are some people who have not started Kubernetes up yet on their laptops. So they could do that. That's optional. You definitely have to install the CLI because there is this command Gimlet environment connect. Takes the environment, the server, and the token as a parameter. I have all these previous steps, so I just this up. Do you see the bottom of the screen as well?
Yeah, it says installing Flux.
Yes. So Gimlet itself, all it does is just, it has a dashboard and it writes to Git. And there's a GitOps controller required to deliver those YAMLs. And right now we are heavily invested in the Flux ecosystem, primarily because it's much more modular. There's no UI. You can integrate with it rather easily.
Is that Flux 1 or Flux 2?
It's Flux 2. We are, I believe, on the generally available version, 2.1, which was released yesterday. Should be coming next week.
Cool. Yeah, because I only went GA like, 4 weeks ago or something? 5 weeks ago, I think it was.
Yes,
So
yes. Yeah. So so obviously we are a small company, so sometimes we are behind versions. So we are not like super on top all the time. In this case, we were very keen on doing the RCs as well for 2.0. And it was very easy to upgrade for us.
Yeah, I love the way that Flux 2 works versus Flux 1. The way that the sources are all separated from the customizations and stuff like that. Like you said, it's very modular. And the OCI support and the S3 bucket support is all really sweet. So.
Yes. Now that the environment is connected, you see a different icon, some more tabs, and some information there. If you set up your own environments, it's actually interesting because now the screen is so large. If I just zoom out just a little bit. Never mind. This was not a CSS issue. I know what's going on. Anyways, so if you set up your own environments, you can have different folder structures and different amount of Git repositories. So there is some flexibility in the bootstrapping part of things. But as of now, we have a connected environment which maps to a cluster basically. We have clients where environments are mapped to namespaces. It's doable, not very well documented. So I would recommend people to jump on to our Discord to map a namespace to a Gimlet environment. And down here, it's basically just Flux statuses. If it's small, it's just we have two Git repositories, and these are the latest update times and when things were applied and synchronized with Flux. And of course, you can dive deeper into the Git repository and customization statuses.
Okay, cool.
All right. Let's integrate GitHub. There is some text like, no, we're not going to steal your passwords. No, we're not going to steal your code. You don't even grant any access to us. Basically, that's the whole text, and you can install it under your organization or your personal profile. I recommend everyone to just use their personal profile. And only grant access, even if it's their own application that you are creating, only grant access to just a couple of repos while they are evaluating Gimlet. So I select just 2 examples. System, and I install and authorize. Now the permission list is quite excessive, so that's why I recommend people that just take the repositories that you use to just test things out first, and then once you gain some trust, I hope this won't be a problem.
Okay, so this was a GitHub application rather than throwing around any sort of SSH access key or things like that. So I'm assuming we're going to see a deeper integration with GitHub than what we'd see traditionally from Flux or Argo.
Yes, GitHub, I believe, has a very good integration approach with the applications and installations, and I could go on and on about this. Now we tried to integrate with GitLab as well, and like 8 months ago, it was working. However, since we don't have any GitLab customers at this point, it was left behind somewhat. So we had to, have some push to bring GitLab up to speed. And honestly, their integration approach is more like a big bang approach. Like they have an admin token, and boom, you give access to everything. So I'm liking the GitHub way much better.
All right.
So if you're a developer, this is where you live. This is where you land repositories. I'm an Express.js or like a Node.js developer, and I'm an Express application. I came in here. I see that I have an environment. Probably my cluster administrator set it up, or I did it just with a different hat on. And there's no configurations, no pods running, nothing. I just see that it's connected to a cluster. So I should see things if there would be things on the cluster. And down here, you see branches and commits and whatnot. And basically, this is the point where, this is an Express.js app. I would need a Docker file, a Docker container, maybe integrate with CI somehow, then a Kubernetes YAML file, and all these steps we actually packed into just this magically colored button. Internally, we call the magic deploy. Obviously, you can use all those things. So you can have a Docker file, you can integrate with Circle CI, all the CIs out there. But if you just want to see Gimlet, or you just want to see Kubernetes for the first time, you just push deploy on the latest version or the latest commit. Okay,
so I want to make sure I understood what you're saying there, right? Are you saying that right now your Express application is just an Express application with no Docker file and no Kubernetes manifest?
100%. If I go to GitHub, it has a package.json and a Node.js file saying hello.
Okay, so are you using like build packs under the hood to deploy this application?
Correct, yes. We are using build packs, and this is the image building phase. And here is just the build packs output.
Nice.
Build packs is nice when it works, and when it doesn't, they tell you to create a build pack configuration file, but it sort of defeats the purpose in my view. And also, since everything is running on localhost, If I suppose you have a Mac with an Apple Silicon
Yes.
architecture. For that, we had to do one of the few core tech contributions to the world that BuildPacks doesn't work on ARM.
Ah, there we go.
So yes, so when we stop the stream and you go home and I don't know, you play a bit of gaming and then you come back to Gimlet. We ported BuildPacks for the Node.js ecosystem to ARM. So obviously this won't build everything, but yeah, like your Node apps
Okay.
should
Can I
work.
clarify a couple more things then?
Yep.
Okay. So we have a K3D cluster, which is running
Yes.
Gimlet. You added an environment. Is that environment that you added the same K3D cluster or an external cluster?
No, I have just a single K3D cluster
Okay. So does the
where
build pack run in the Gimlet cluster or the environment cluster? Even they could be the same thing, but assuming they're not.
exactly. If we assume it is not, then it is running in the environment cluster.
Okay. Got it. Cool.
It's I think later you will see a little bit more like how things are configured. But basically, right now it's one cluster, but this image builder is running on the target, like the deployment target
Yeah.
cluster. And if it's not running there, like the registry, if it's not running there, you cannot deploy with this magic button.
Okay. So it builds an image, configures the deployment, and we're off to the races. Job done.
Exactly. And it creates a GitOps commit. So this is where GitOps come into the picture. There is a commit which I could click and I will click rather soon, where you will see the whole YAML and all the things, and you see the Flux state that it has been applied. And now you're back in the repository screen where you see, yeah, I had a deployment 3 minutes ago. It was by me. This is the version I pushed. You can open this up and you can see like a little heartbeat of what was going on, like the release event and then the actual version that was deployed.
All right. Nice.
And here, this is a deployment which has a single pod. We're gonna configure it. I guess that's the classic scaling example. We're gonna like take the replicas slider and just increase it to 10 or something. And yeah, you can look at the logs and whatnot. And here you can see there is this little label showing which version is deployed. And if we should we make a change in the application, or should we access the application, or we can take this wherever from here.
Okay. So let's talk about this generated commit. Is that to my Express application, or is there a GitOps repository now where you do all of these automated things?
There is a GitOps repository. Each environment has, by convention, 2 repositories, one for application stuff and one for infrastructure stuff. Now, how many Git repositories, how many folders? I think people can debate this endlessly. This is sort of a middle ground that has worked well for us.
Okay. So can we start by looking at the commit and see what was generated for us?
100%. Let me just do one technical thing here. To you remember that this profound sky was in Gimlet just when we logged in. It was already created. We didn't have any GitHub access at that point or nothing. So at this point, this is this is a Git repository, but lives inside Gimlet. But I can convert it to a real environment, and if I push this button, it will be thrown onto GitHub, and the magic of GitOps and Flux and everything is going to reconfigure itself. It's magic. Like when when you update Flux, you just update the version number in a Git repository, and it updates itself. It's like magical.
Well, that's a really interesting pattern, actually, right? Because one of the challenges with GitOps as it stands today, right, particularly around Flux and Argo CD, is that the ability to spin up ephemeral clusters with preview style environments is a little bit trickier than it probably should be because it relies on a real Git repository somewhere, and then all of our environments need certain configuration. There's loads of little parts that need to be in the right place. The
Mhm.
idea that Gimlet just runs its own internal Git repository for this stuff in each environment kind of enables that pattern a lot easier.
Yeah. Honestly, I we had like 3 or 4 iterations on the installer and how, because it's so many moving parts. I mean, it's Kubernetes, it's GitOps, it's everything, and this by the far the simplest. And again, if I push this button, I convert it to a GitOps environment. This is the time when it goes to GitHub, creates the repo, pushes the manifests, updates the manifests to actually Flux to point to this new GitHub location. So actually, we should watch this. There is a bug actually here that it keeps jumping back to the deploy status. Yeah, so now the customization is updating, just waiting for some dependency and so on. So basically, at this point, we have these 2 repositories. One is applications, where you can see the Express.js test application YAMLs from 7 minutes ago. And there is the infrastructure one, which has a lot more, of course.
Cool.
So if you actually jump back to the deployment, these now are clickable, which surprises me even. Like I didn't refresh the page or anything, and it just suddenly just works. But anyways, this was the commit that was made for the deployment service. And there's something called the release JSON, which is a bunch of release information for Gimlet to display the version history efficiently.
All right, nice. Okay, so shall we make a change?
Yes. We can make 2 kind of changes. We can make a configuration change, or we can make an application change. But let's do an application change first, okay? So I think I have this one cloned. Projects. I should go to Express.js test app. Oh, come on. So I'm a developer. Ignore this folder for now because these are previous test configurations. But in the Node.js, we're going to say hello row code world. So this is the new version. If you head back here, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was going to ask if this is going to, like, because in the first deploy, you had to push the button. I was wondering, does it now, because you've done it once, start to automate based on the main branch, or do we still have to go in and click the button?
For now, we're going to click the button, but we can automate it in the next step right afterwards.
Okay.
Technically, we could do the automation. I just want to finish this example. So you see the commit here. On a normal deployment, which is not running on localhost, a GitHub webhook would have pushed this commit much sooner. But if you're localhost, you can push this refresh and it's going to appear. All right, so this is the latest demo with raw code, and this is the new one. And again, it builds the application. I still haven't defined any Docker files or anything, or not even Kubernetes YAML, but we're going to soon get into that realm as well. Now it's trailing, and now it's actually, you see the pods flashing, and now it's the version is demo with raw code. Commit was applied. Actually, if I click this, this is the GitOps commit. yeah, some hashes were updated, and yeah, the image hash was also updated.
Nice.
Kind of what you would expect. All right, and maybe let's access the application first. Yeah, I could port forward for now, or we could do ingress maybe later. And you were asking if we can automate the deployment of things. Now, this is the application configuration screen. So up until this point, everything was default, but you can take this default and make it yours. This is basically just a Helm chart, and we have a UI rendered on top. You can start using a real image, not just this built-in registry. You can change the replicas, and you want it to deploy based on a policy. Now, I have to tell you bad news, because this only works if things are more properly set up with CI integration and so on. So actually, we are missing a trigger for this to work in this scenario.
Okay.
But if you build your own image, like on GitHub Actions, and your CI is running, and that there is a point where your CI, like today, maybe does a kubectl apply or a Helm install or something. Instead, there is a Gimlet GitHub action which would speak or talk back to Gimlet like, hey, there's a new version. And then this trigger would work. Like, hey, if there's a tag on, I don't know, v something. Yeah.
Okay.
Right now, let me just make a change, like a configuration change to 3 replicas, and maybe set an environment variable, which is I. And there is this intermediate format, which is basically parameterizing the Helm chart that we use by default, and it takes a few parameters. If I save this, now this is the first time where application configuration, like the deployment configuration, is getting into my source code. Laszlo CPH is editing this deployment config for the Profound Sky environment. It's placing a single file in your repository. This is the Gimlet manifest. It pins down the chart and have some values, or you could use customized patches or just raw plain Kubernetes manifests. If I merge this, my team liked it, and I go back to Gimlet, and since this is a local, I push this refresh button. The pull request is here, less than a minute ago, and if I deploy this guy, then remember we changed the replicas to 3, and we defined environment variable.
Okay, nice. So I'm assuming this one chart that is being used is really just, I mean, we've all seen this time and time again. The way that we deploy an application to Kubernetes is almost ubiquitous. You have a deployment, you have a service, you may have an ingress, there may be a config map, there may be a sequence. I'm assuming this one chart just has value files that allow us to tweak how those all speak to each other.
Exactly.
Very clever.
It's actually it's getting some traction and some GitHub stars, and it's been out there for almost 4 years, and it's one of the easier to explain things Gimlet has.
Yeah.
So
I mean, all of them charts, they're all the same at the end of the day, but then every option becomes configurable, and they all regress to the same chart, yet we all publish charts uniquely as if they're some sort of snowflake. No,
exactly.
I like this.
And of course, if you're PostgreSQL, you might have an HA setup which requires very intricate setups. But most in most cases, you just, I don't know, yeah, what you said.
Yeah, most people write a web application that exposes some
Exactly.
port that needs a
Yeah.
service, and that's it. Like, job done.
Actually, I want to do a plug. So we have a YAML generator, which is basically the Helm chart and the screen that you've seen. You can use this online as well. So this just changed the replicas to 3 or 5, actually 5, yeah. And you can send it to your friend with base 64 encoded values and so on. And there's a static site option. This is one of my favorites. This is actually like this is all the parameters it takes. If you recall how Netlify works, you set the build command and the folder. And basically, this is what we did with the Helm chart and an init container. So
Yeah, nice.
So that's
Can you go back to the web app for a second?
Yeah, of course.
Did I see no the on your generator? There was a pod disruption budget, right?
Oh yeah. Sorry, where should I go? Should I go to the generator?
Yeah, it was on your generator. I just noticed the pod disruption budget. And I was like, oh, that's fancy.
Yeah, high
I don't
availability.
see a lot of people deploying them, but that's a nice little toggle button that just makes it work.
Yeah. As I told you, we operate many things for our customers. So things we need are in here.
So here's the secret sauce question, right? Your spread pods across nodes, is that a pod topology spread constraint, or is it affinities?
I think the first one, but I don't recall. So how about I turn it off? I copy this guy and put it here, and then I turn it on and copy, start a new one. This is something that you don't necessarily see very well, but how do I do? Reopen editor. Yeah. Anyways, let me scroll. This was the off, and this is the on. Huh. Let me come back here. It's on. This is a bug.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually adding.
It doesn't add anything. It's perhaps because of the replica count.
Oh yeah, perhaps.
Oh man. At least we found something useful today.
Well, it's this open source. Can people contribute?
Exactly. We should have a unit test for this.
Right. So we need someone to fix the bug and someone to write an OPA policy. There we go.
Exactly. So tests. I don't know, man. Yeah, I need to check this. Something is off. Maybe there is some extra requirement.
Jump into templates and then let's open deployment.yaml.
Exactly. Deployment YAML. And then
See what we got.
How is it called? Affinity or something?
Yeah, there would either be an affinity or a spread constraint.
Pod affinity, spread across nodes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, based on these labels. Yeah.
So I will make my first contribution to your chart this evening.
Thank you.
Because there's a really nice new feature. Oh, I guess it depends on which versions of Kubernetes you want to support with the one chart, right? And Kubernetes 126 pod topology spread constraints were added, which allows you to replace all the old affinity stuff that we used to use to get it one per node. The problem with one per node is that if you get one on it and you need 4 and there's 3 nodes, you can't schedule the 4th. But with pod topology spread constraints, you can actually, it will put one on as many nodes as are possible and then spread them again and again and again. So it layers them up. Very cool.
Yeah, this was added 2 years ago. So yeah, definitely not 126.
Anyway, let's go back to the good stuff. So
all right. Yeah. So as like a developer, you can roll back and you can set up your integrations with Git and so on and all kinds of stuff actually. But this is the core. So like the view and you know, like the feel of things.
Yeah, very nice.
And of course, if you're a cluster administrator, we have like a marketplace kind of thing, like all
Oh, neat.
GitOps bagged. Yeah, it's all GitOps bagged. So it's not like when you go to DigitalOcean. I think you click one-click deploy or one-click applications, it installs it. But what happens afterwards? That's a question mark. Like how do you keep it up to date and so on? And since this is GitOps, all these components are just community Helm charts. Like actually, I don't have anything special here, but maybe I'm going to deploy Nginx just so you can see it. But we have Helm releases repositories, and yeah, let me enable Nginx. There's like a one pager, like what you can do with it. Enable, and we don't expose much of the the wide options of all the Helm charts. What we have a knowledge base entry for, and what we support is like it's mandatory. Expose those, and you can use these. You can extend these Helm chart values in Git. So now what is being placed into this repository is regular Flux CRDs, like Helm release. And you can extend these values. We will not break it. We will not lose it. There is like a three-way merge going on every time we update these. So you could have custom configurations in here. But if your peer approve this and you merge it, then of course Flux going to pull it down, install, and it is visible somewhat again in this. Let me just push a refresh in this this view. So now this is pointing to the latest commit, and there should be a message here. Why is it waiting right now? But yeah, you can deploy components like this. And now that you have an Ingress controller, of course, the world opens up and you have Cert Manager. And honestly, just by Gimlet just puts YAMLs into a Git repository and builds on brilliant components and brilliant custom or Kubernetes resources. And just by this very thin feature set, we can support basically, yeah, all the needs that a small, medium company needs. And of course, whenever you just grow out of Gimlet, you jump into these repositories and you make modifications to the infrastructure components as you please. For the developer part, we have a workflow. People might like it, might not like it, and yeah, they can decide for themselves. And I really encourage everybody to jump onto the website, because it's really all it takes is K3D and kubectl. Yeah.
Awesome. Nice. Great. Let me pop us over. Is the demo done? Yep. All right. Okay, cool.
I think at least until we have more topics to discuss, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. What I like about Gimlet is it's hooking into the open source ecosystem. It's using Flux under the hood, but it's then, you kind of appreciate that Flux is just a primitive. It's not a platform. It requires a lot more work from developer teams beyond that. And Gimlet seems to just be sitting on top of that and saying, well, let's make this easier. So I like that I can't believe you gave that 30 seconds at the end, the marketplace, right? But that's a huge feature. Like, again, for people that just want to get stuff deployed to Kubernetes, they want to get Kata involved. They want to have an Ingress controller. They want to deploy a Postgres, wherever that might be. There's now a framework that can do that. And if those things don't exist in the marketplace just now, then someone can just go and add it as an open source contribution. So we're building, an entire product that the community can benefit from that makes life easier for the people that don't want to be in the nitty-gritty all day. I like that. The UI and the syncing and all of that is really cool too. And using build packs. It's very cool. I like it.
Thank you. Yeah, so you mentioned Kata, and yeah, you install Kata. It just went, just graduated in CNCF.
Yes.
And so I've set up Kata for the 5th time for, in the past 2 years or something. And the use case was like, hey, I have a queue. I need to have a worker processing just one unit of the queue, and I should auto scale this. And this is a very complex thing. And I told the guy, this is going to be fun. Like, join me, screen share. We were done in an hour. And this is when I say that Kubernetes is like crazy major in some areas, of course, and we are lacking a bunch of things elsewhere. But as you said, like from those marketplace, that's one building block. I would really like if Gimlet could be the content place as well, like where people could get this operational knowledge, like, hey, I need SSL, hey, I need an auto-scaled job with a Redis queue, all these things like what DigitalOcean did, like I mentioned earlier. So that's definitely part of the vision, but we are a bootstrap company, and life is always in the way and so on. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, every time I talk about Kubernetes at a conference, right, there's always the people that say, but it's a lot of complexity. And what if you don't need that complexity? And my answer to that these days, right, is like Kubernetes is what, 7 years old? A lot, in fact, older than that, right? It's got to the point where it's almost ubiquitous if people are deploying with containers. So now you've got a choice as a small organization. You either use the thing that everyone else is using, or you just use Docker or some other tool that's not as complicated. However, because everyone else is using Kubernetes, all the evolution is happening here, all the conveniences are happening here. You're going to lose out on tools like Kata and Captain, Gimlet, all of these things. Monitoring is drastically easier with Kubernetes because you can just install Prometheus, right? So you sacrifice all that stuff. And yes, there is a bit of complexity, but we're fortunate enough to have people like you and others in this space who are building tools to make this easier for the people that just want to get shit done. And I think that's really cool. So Kubernetes is complex, but it's worth it to take advantage of all these amazing evolutions. So.
David, you are saying this better than I am. So, so thank you for all this. I'm taking notes, and I'm gonna watch the recording and put all this on the marketing page. So thank you for this wonderful summary.
All right. Well, before we finish up, why don't you tell us, you've mentioned the vision of Gimlet a couple of times. So maybe tell us what's coming next. What are you working on? What's exciting? What's the future of Gimlet?
Many things are exciting. Right now, I am honestly, we are getting Google searches on things like, how do I deploy static site on Kubernetes? Like, if we wrote a static site blog post in April, and that's the highest performing one. Also, this YAML generator you've seen is also on the top 3 from where we are getting traffic. So it's not exciting from the product's perspective, but it's exciting from the business's perspective that we should funnel in all those people and maybe widening this audience that could come to Kubernetes. So definitely that's this one focus area of mine to help these people and really help them, and getting adoption and users and so on. And obviously on the product side, there's so many things we can do and we probably should do, like application troubleshooting, like if the pod is in crash loop, like what to do, either with content pieces or like well-placed warnings. I don't want to go like 100% in, there are startups on this niche alone. So I don't want to do all that, but at least covering the basics, because I think we should do a lot more than what we do today. So that's definitely an interest area. And then comes the brilliant use case of, if you could provision cloud resources like an SQL database or a cloud Redis instance with Crossplane, or we actually had something working with the Terraform controller, but now sort of not prioritizing that too much at the moment. Yeah, so those are like, I'm an engineer and I just love that use case, and we have it working, and it's super simple, and it just comes down again us creating a YAML file in a Git repository, and the wonderful ecosystem of Kubernetes, all those controllers just work. So I just love that. So most likely we're going to do marketing and nailing the developer workflows and some observability and troubleshooting. I think that's very much in focus right now. Polishing the big things we have, filling in the gaps because we have gaps.
All right. And lastly, if people want to get involved, they want to contribute, or they would just want to follow you for all of your takes on Kubernetes and complexity, where do they go?
They go to Gimlet.io and launch K3D and launch Gimlet. That's the most important because we are so hungry for feedback, and we have a Discord channel. You can find that on Gimlet.io. We have Twitter, Laszlo CPH, and we are on YouTube live streaming and hoping to pop up, everywhere where people are. KCDs. We are going to Austria in September 25th. Sadly, we have to miss Sivo Navigate. That's just not good timing wise, and all kinds of things. But yes, come find us on Twitter, Gimlet_IO, and Laszlo CPH, and also GitHub. Yeah, everywhere.
All right, just go to Google, search for Laszlo and Gimlet. You won't miss.
Exactly,
All right.
exactly.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening, for joining me, for having a beer, and for talking some really cool tech stuff and showing us an amazing demo.
Thank you very much, David, and all your really cool summaries. It has been very cool. Thank you.
All right. And to everyone watching, have a great weekend. We'll see you all soon. Until next time. Bye.
Thank you for watching Warcode Live.